So Dr. Laly Lichtenfeld is a woman with a passion for Africa and for conservation. Residing in Tanzania, Laly co-founded African People and Wildlife in 2005 to help rural communities conserve and benefit from their wildlife and natural resources. In 2005, Laly received her Ph.D. from Yale University for novel research combining wildlife ecology and social ecology in an interdisciplinary study of human-lion relationships, interactions, and conflicts on the Maasai steppe of northern Tanzania. Today, with 20 years of on-the-ground experience in East African wildlife conservation, Laly specializes in human-wildlife conflict prevention, species conservation, focusing on lions and other big cats, community empowerment and engagement in natural resource management, conservation education, and the development of conservation incentives for rural people. And so with that, I will let Laly tell you about her work.
It's a pleasure to be able to tell you a little bit about our work in Tanzania, where I've been living for the last 18 years. So the question that we ask at our organization is, can human and wild coexist in this century together in an amicable way? And that's sort of what we focus on a daily basis. How can people and wildlife, large wildlife like big cats, coexist? And we believe it is possible, and the mission of our organization is really focused around finding the balance for communities and nature. So we've taken a very different approach to conservation, not simply looking at it from the wildlife point of view, but turning the question around and asking, why would rural people want to protect their environments and the wildlife species? And we work very closely with communities to develop solutions to living with large and sometimes potentially dangerous mammals. The work has been going now. We co-founded the organization in 2005, so we spent the last 10 years really developing our model of community-driven conservation. We do this from our Rural Environmental Center on the southeastern border of Tarangire National Park, so way, way out in the wild. This is where I flew from on Thursday. And the center that we built there was given to us, the land was given to us by the rural community after about 5 years of partnership while I was doing my Ph.D. research at Yale. So we have a very, very close relationship with the Maasai community there, and the center is a resource for people to learn about the environment, to share traditional knowledge, and to come up with innovative strategies for coexisting with wildlife. So over the last 10 years, we've been working on our community-driven conservation model. This is a very simple equation, so if anybody's sweating right now, good luck when Nergis talks. It's rather embarrassing. Sorry, Nergis, it's just simple math here. But our community-driven approach and our process is what's absolutely critical to the work that we do. So really taking a very sophisticated approach to how we work with communities. If you can learn the rural language, the dialect, the way people are talking about the environment, then you end up being on the same playing field with people. You're speaking the same language. So the approach of how we work with community members, we have over 100 people on our team in various ways. Most of them are rural community members that come from the places where we're working. And then you need a strategic approach to how you're going to engage. So the process becomes very important. And our process starts with conflict. In fact, we find that's the best place to dig in, is where there is a problem. If we can work mutually to solve it, you build a lot of trust, and then you can move on to the next more difficult conflict. So we work starting with conflict prevention. We then work very closely, hand in hand with community members to share traditional and scientific knowledge, to work towards adaptive and active management on the ground. So this is a process, it's a revolving process that continues to evolve every year with the communities where we work. And the fourth step in the process is incentives. If you can help people, to really benefit from environmental protection, whether that's from ecological protection of a watershed that a community depends on for their children and for their families, or whether it's a financial incentive by being able to reap the benefits of good environmental protection. These are the things that help make these programs sustainable in the long term. So one of the ways, and I'll talk of several innovative ways that we're working with communities. We started around conflict between people and big cats, and we work with a number of gentlemen from across northern Tanzania. We're working in 6 different landscapes across northern Tanzania, called Warriors for Wildlife. And these individuals are community members residing in their local environments, keeping tabs on the big cats, keeping tabs on conflict, trying to understand why conflict is occurring and how we can resolve it. So they're there on the ground all the time, helping people to find lost livestock if animals get lost at night, so they're not picked up by the big cats or the other carnivores at night. And they're also helping to install our very innovative living walls. So this is one of our flagship projects, and living walls are environmentally friendly, predator-proof corrals that keep people safe from lions and lions out of the way of Maasai spears. And essentially it's just a tree planted in the ground with a chain-link fence attached to it. And they're 99% successful in keeping predators out of corrals. Where we have these in high densities across communities, we've seen depredation at the boma drop by 90%, and we've seen retaliatory killing of lions just completely go away. So it's a very, very exciting project. It's long-term, it's sustainable. The trees continue to grow and add height to the fence. With this initiative, we've actually planted over 150,000 trees in local communities. And the community members plant them themselves, and they pay 25% of the cost of the fence. So they're actually definitely invested in the project. This isn't a handout in any sense. And as a result of this initiative, we are now seeing lion populations rebounding. It's a very exciting time for us. We have some preliminary data to show that the Tarangire lion population has now gone from a declining population to a recovering population. This will be the largest recovery of a lion population in East Africa. So we're very excited. It's across about 12,000 square kilometers of landscape, so it's a big area to be working. And of course, as the lions come back, we anticipate potentially more trouble. So it actually doesn't make our work easier. It means we have to be even more aware of where the lions are and to help keep them out of trouble and to help keep people safe. So as we progress forward, if we were just focusing on human-wildlife conflict prevention, that's just a tiny piece of the puzzle, and it's the easiest part to work on. It's the habitat conservation that's absolutely critical, ensuring these animals still have room to roam. And we do that through some very innovative strategies. I'll talk just very briefly about our Sustainable Rangelands program. This is working hand in hand with pastoralists, people that move across large landscapes with their livestock, to help improve the quality of their pastures. These pastures are used not only by the livestock, but by a very dispersing large population of prey animals that the lions feed upon. So the wildebeest, the zebra, the buffalo, the eland. And so if we can, again, work mutually together to improve the quality of the pastures, we've got a win-win scenario. We're improving it for the pastoralists and for their livestock, but we're also improving it for the prey populations. And as the prey populations are secure, that also means that the lions have wild prey to feed upon, and they don't need to predator-prey switch over to livestock. So it's a really exciting initiative. We're working in 10 communities right now. What they do is actually, on a monthly basis, actually monitor the health of their rangelands, looking at the height of the grass, the color of the grass, the percent bare ground. And where we've had this program running for the longest, we're actually seeing measurable reduction in bare ground. We're seeing return of important plant species. We've had new wildlife species move back into some of the pastures that people are working on, explicitly linking environmental protection with women's economic development. And this is what I was carrying the flag for with WINGS. What we really want to do is we want to ensure that we're making that strong linkage between environmental protection and economic empowerment. So it's not just about, and I think it's wonderful when there are projects working on, things that people can sell, beadwork and things. That's wonderful and very important. But we wanted to go that next step further to ensure there's a direct linkage to the environment. So with our Women's Beekeeping Initiative, we're working with 50 women's groups at the moment. This is a program that we've been piloting over the last few years and are now set to expand quite a bit in the coming year. 950 women in these women's groups. And what we do is we give them micro grants. So initially we were giving them loans. We realized that we were actually handicapping the women because it takes a little while for the bees to colonize the hives, so the return doesn't come right away. And so they were having to lend money from each other to repay loans, and this really wasn't helping. So we quickly shifted to a granting situation where the women receive a grant to get their businesses off the ground, and they repay it, but not in the form of the funds, but in the form of an environmentally friendly action. So they may go to the market and talk about environmental protection on market day. They may do a river cleanup, picking up trash along the river. Whatever they can do to promote good environmental conservation in their communities. And this, of course, has the beautiful add-on effect of getting people in the communities talking more about environmental conservation. And seeing themselves, each other, doing this kind of work in the community. So it has a lot of neat add-on effects. And so we've so far awarded 122 microgrants to these 50 women's groups. As they're progressing, if they're doing really well with their beekeeping business, we will actually give them enhancement grants to help them get more hives, to keep going, to keep building their business. So there are two different types of grants that we'll give. And so far, they've hung over 900 beehives in wildlife habitats. And the beautiful piece of this is that anywhere a woman hangs a beehive in the wild, Tanzanian beekeeping policy prevents the cutting of the tree. They hang them up in the trees, and they prevent any cultivation around the vicinity of the hives because they want to promote the wild honey, and they need the flowers and the flowering plants for that. So it is very closely linked to wildlife and habitat conservation. But the women, of course, have the incentive because there's a nice economic piece to this. But it's also good for the pastoralists because then they're protecting their pastures again for their livestock, and it's good for the wildlife. So it's all very much linked together. And so one of the goals of this program, and we're working on now with actually the Tanzanian district governments, is if we can actually help the women to consolidate their beehives in wild areas, community by community, and then actually get land rights. So they would get what's called a bee reserve, and they would be given title deed to that land. So the next step of this is actually to help women in rural Africa and in Maasai communities that are very, very patriarchal and male-dominated to actually have their own land and their own resources, which is very, very exciting. And of course, we don't do this without the men's involvement. They're part of the process. They're part of the conversation. It's quite interesting now that we have men saying, well, now I can take a loan for my wife. I don't have to go sell my goat. So that's really exciting to see that they are, for the most part, supporting it. I mean, this is a long-term project in dialogue that we're doing, so in no way can I say that it's 100% supported by the men, but they're coming along. And what we see then is the women become more empowered. They become more of them become part of their village governments. They start taking more active roles in decision-making and get more engaged in the society overall. And what's wonderful about this is when they sell the honey, they have both local markets. Honey is in high demand locally as a medicinal, a thing, and then also as a celebratory, the Maasai like to make honey beer, so for their celebration. So there's a local market for the women to sell their honey, but we're also helping to work to get them to sell it to local markets in Arusha, tourism camps, bulk sales to grocery stores, whatever we can do to help make those market linkages for the lady under the product called Mama Asali. And so far, we've harvested about 3 tons of honey. So we're very much in the honey business these days. And it's really quite an interesting, I don't have time to go into it, but we were very invested for the 3 years trying to look at, what are the best conditions for the bees? Is there some sort of science to this that we can follow? There is not. The bees do different things, within 10 kilometers of each other. So this has turned out to be much more complicated than we thought, but it's wonderful that these are wild honeybees. So this is, all wild, pure African honey. And so far, the women have raised through revenue for the sale of the honey, $7,100. This is a very small amount at the moment, because again, we're still working on the market linkages, and as soon as we make stronger linkages to the stores in Arusha and the camps, their revenue is going to go way up because we can sell this as wildlife-friendly honey at a higher price point than other honey being sold in Tanzania. But what's great about this is what we've seen the women doing, and again, this is their project. So what they do with the revenue, how they decide to build these businesses is up to them, of course. And what we've seen them doing is actually reinvesting money in some cases. They buy their own hives and start to build out their business. They will then also take revenue and take the profit and share it among each other. So then one person can go out and start another little business that she wants to start, or she needs medical supplies, or she needs to pay school fees. So they have a very interesting way of helping one another within their group, and a lot of collegiality that goes along with that. So it's also building relationships and really exciting in terms of how they're moving it forward and investing in their own futures and in their children's futures. And of course, speaking of investing, we've made a long-term commitment to northern Tanzania. I've been living there for 18 years. I don't see leaving ever. So we're also investing in tomorrow's leaders, which are the children of today. We have a big youth environmental education program that culminates in 6-year scholarships to quote from one of the young gentlemen in our program who says, I love all the science subjects, but my favorite is biology. I'd like to be an animal biologist one day. So perhaps this is the future Tandy of Tanzania. So, being there, being long-term and invested means that these children, when they come out of school, and we have now our first graduates that are attending university, we have one young man doing a degree in clinical medicine, means that, going forward, we have a more educated community thinking and talking about the environment, having been supported by environment and conservation. So going forward, the work becomes easier because you have people invested in these ideas and promoting them themselves. And as a result, the lion that I showed you on the initial slide, that was Laly Lichtenfeld. His name is leader in the Maasai, because he's the leader of the return of the lions across the Tarangire ecosystem. And this is the last time we saw him. He was with this female, a mating pair. And so we do have great hope for the future of lions and people in Tanzania. We have hope that Laly Lichtenfeld's future cubs will grow up in a world where people can coexist and find the balance between communities and nature. And that helps us all work towards a vision of a world in balance. So with that, I'll say thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. And
what a wonderful and optimistic and hopeful talk. Thank you. Questions from the audience? Yes.
So Laly, this is fabulous work. My question was, since you were so optimistic, what do you see as sort of the next challenges that you have to deal with in the next few years? Because it looks like things are really on the up and up.
The question is, what are the challenges going forward? It's certainly the elephant in the room is human population growth. It's changing land use patterns, in some cases more and more change of land use to agriculture, tilling the land. The Maasai themselves, I think, are in a period where they really have to answer for themselves who they want to be going forward. We do some really interesting things in our center, showing people their landscapes through Google Earth Live. So they can actually see their homesteads, they can see where the land is tilled, where it's not tilled, and they're really beginning to kind of take a step back and say, there's not a lot of pasture left. And so big decisions for communities in terms of who they want to be in the future. And, if we can help to continue that strong tradition of pastoralism in the Maasai community, and the cattle are so central to who they are, then I think we can work towards a scenario where we do have strong wildlife conservation paired with good rangeland management. I mean, of course, these areas are going to inevitably shrink to some degree, so we're going to have losses, but I do think we can still maintain a very healthy wildlife population if we all work together and if we can address these big elephants in the room.